Good morning, viewers. We're just at about 7:35 a.m. I'm Julien Skeete, and welcome back to the Tobago Updates morning show, coming to you here live from the Port Mall in Scarborough, Tobago. In this segment, we are chatting with Max James, former Assemblyman of the Tobago House of Assembly. Good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning, Julian, and thank you for having me as usual.
All right. So, we're diving right on in. We are seeing some of the happenings, and most recently, we would have seen a public meeting take place in Speyside by the Tobago People's Party, led by the Honorable Chief Secretary, now interim political leader. Tell us that we want to start from there. This political entity would have been formed out of the circumstances that took place with the Progressive Democratic Patriots, and now are attempting, while in office and serving as the current administration, to be able to make strides in building out a political party. Your thoughts? Is it steps in the right direction? Are they moving quickly enough? Are they moving too slow? And we're starting in the first instance from party structure, based on your experience being involved in political parties.
Well, Julian, I'll be very, very, very frank. In my opinion, entitled to my opinion, I think it's moving too slowly for my liking, if you ask me. From since the rollout of the Constitution last year, and then you having close to about 8 months, 9 months later, you're now going to have your the elections of your officers or offices, whichever way. So I think it's too slowly, because thereafter you will only have a few more months towards the national elections, followed closely by Tobago House of Assembly elections. You don't have the offices in place as yet to help you do the work that is required on the ground. And I think that they may justify it, but I think that it's moving too slowly. Those offices should have been filled since last year, in my view. However, it's a good sign that the party can still get its act together. And well, yes, it's a good thing that it will happen, but I think it's been happening too slowly, because the PNM is a very formidable party. It's a well-structured party, full of structure and chickenry as well, full of the old tricks in the game, and they know how to play it. So that you have to be very well prepared. They will say, well, we're taking our time, it's going to be done. But I think that and then I was, I have to say it, because it's the second time the Chief Secretary is saying that, where he berates elderly people by saying, well, we want the young people to lead the charge on autonomy, but we don't want to have people who are knocking on their caskets. No, that's very offensive. It's uncalled for, and it takes away from your message. It shames the elderly. It shames me too. Somebody close to me heard it and said they will not vote. So you don't want to cloud your message by making those uncalled for, as we say in tennis, unforced errors. You could have simply said, I want the young people to be more involved. And we'll be glad to have them more involved. And then you begin to put structures and systems in place to ingratiate the young people on this whole question of autonomy. But different to that, outside of that, I think he went home to be revalidated. There wasn't a massive crowd. There seems to be been some political fallout over the 2 years. That was expected. But now he has to begin the task of rebuilding that political capital. Again, lost through actions that were not necessary, like those things that happened in the public service, the firings and the non-renewal of contracts, bad advice taken in that regard. And I'm going to let them go in terms of that, because you want those same people to vote for you. You're talking about people who have lost their employment and their families are impacted negatively. They can't pay bills. They can't have a decent lifestyle, standard of living. because you would have taken actions, ill-advised actions in respect of employment. So I have a shopping list for him, and we'll go through that if we have the time.
So, but no problem at all. As you speak that, I wanted to get your perspective as well. Similarly, you referred to the former administration currently now in the minority.
Yes.
And they too have been out in communities. They too have been reaching out and connecting. Based on what you have described as their structure and systems, do you see this as one of their definite methods that will work in favor in terms of the current outreach that is taking place, apart from the issues that they are bringing forward?
You mean the PNM?
Yes, correct. Apart from the issues that they are bringing forward in the public space as concerns with the current administration?
Well, yes, the PNM never stopped campaigning. And I suspect the TPP, but they were severely put on the back foot by actions of their own. Because if you sit in, my take on it, if you sit in the executive and you talk about a mandate, who gave you the mandate? The mandate had to be refreshed. It's not to say that we only get it from the Meet the People meetings. That is not enough. You have to have political structures and systems and architecture that can sanction you and guide you and tell you this is what you must do. People who are of your own party, more specifically, that is. And therefore, that is now being put in place. But you're 2 years down the road. And I'm hoping for Tobago's sake that it is not enough to clap somebody when they talk and it seems to make sense when it's not really anything sensible. Because if the party structures were in place, then you would have been surely told you can't do that to your labor force, because the sanctions would have been there.
But then how do you respond to the issue that for those who will say it is not the best thing, but it appears that this is what political parties do. They come into office. We saw it happen in the Keith Rowley-led administration. He made it very clear when he was coming in that the Ministry of Tobago Development in its current construct will be no more because it is now duplicating functions of the THA, and without hesitation we saw scores of workers being sent home. It started with protests and so on happening, and then that appeared to have died away. My information tells me when Orville London started in 2001 as Chief Secretary, coming from the heavy roller times, Hutroy Charles, there was a heavy following and leaning towards Hutroy Charles and those who were not in favor of the PNM, and he too had to make changes. How do you respond when people say this is a natural part of the startup, even if the one that feels the burn are those who have to lose their jobs at a given time? How do you respond to that?
So, I had said, it caused some national debate when I said you don't govern with recrimination. It is not logical to say, well, the PNM did it, and therefore we'll do it. It doesn't make logic. It doesn't make sense. And because you are creating an unnecessary divide between yourself and those persons who are loyal to you and who may have voted for you. But there's no financial, economic, or organizational reason for the non-renewal of the contracts, for terminations, unlawful terminations. If you lose the public service, you lose your election. Public service is about 15,000 persons strong. Including daily paid workers inside of that. And if you lose that voting block, or you offend them, you remember, as you made reference to the Tobago Ministry of Tobago Development,
yes.
What happened afterward? The PNM lost the elections because there were a number of events, including that caused a movement away from the PNM, because that whole ministry was dissolved, and in Tobago they lost the elections. So that is not strategic. That doesn't make sense for you to come and say, well, I have to employ my party supporters there. If they look around, they will see that they could create other units, another system, other public services through which their party loyals could find employment. But you don't enter into that domain of the dismissals and renewals. In fact, one secretary went on to say on this very station, we should fire or demolish the entire Tobago public service. And when I heard that as a former trade unionist, I was appalled. She never walked the sands of Scarborough. She never walked the sands of Fyzabad. She never held a flag for any workers' cause. She doesn't even know how the Tobago House of Assembly Act, that particular clause that separated the Tobago Public Service from the Trinidad Public Service. And who pays you? It's the public service that you're calling for an abolition, and I use the word demolition, of the public service. And therefore, when workers hear these kinds of things, what do you expect them, how do you expect them to feel? And nobody has said, has publicly said, listen, you can't say that. You should apologize. When the chief secretary goes to a certain place and says, what are you worrying all yourself? Nobody ain't losing their work. 6 weeks later, everyone, man, Jack and child has lost their job. Has he apologized? No. And I'm saying if a public service of which you are the Secretary for Public Administration, you have to set the strategies and systems in place that can cause workers to be happy with you, more or less. You can't satisfy everybody, and not everything you do we will like. But in the majority, people's bread and butter are critical to your support and to their standard of living. But I'm saying, if you show me an organizational reason for your actions, then I'll step back. Because management, that whole science of management, performance management, human resource management is underplayed. People tend to talk about medicine and engineering, but who have to manage those same people and engineers and doctors and so forth? Management. They have to focus on good management, good systems of management. It has to be lifted from its dormancy, or where people have placed it in other areas where they shouldn't place management, and lift it out there and give it active purpose within all the divisions of the assembly. It is the only tool that can make the organization of the assembly look good, and where the proper work ethics are followed. They have proper productivity, accountability, performance management. That is key to their success and the effectiveness of the executive council. Without that, you're going to fail.
All right. So we also saw this weekend where the chief secretary, in relating what he described as the achievements over the last 2 years, he utilized a strategy that appeared to be making the consistent comparison with the former administration that served for 21, some of the areas where what they would have done or taken the 21 years to do collectively versus where this administration has been able to move along, what they have described as achievements in 2 years. What are your thoughts in relation to what would have been defined as the achievements of this administration in 2 years comparatively with that of the former administration for 21?
There is a vast gulf between the performance of the TPP and the PNM. The TPP has been able to do things in a few days or in a few months that the PNM has taken 20 years to accomplish. So that there's no comparison at all. And any honest person who look around will give the TPP full marks for performance in terms of their trust to develop Tobago. But at the same time, you don't want to throw away that goodwill. So I'm urging the Chief Secretary and his team to pull back, start with an apology. It is important. They may say, oh, it's happened again, but Tobagonians have very long memories. And what they have to do is to be prepared to and begin to take up the legal battles to protect our hard-won rights contained in the Tobago House Assembly Act. It's critical. They have been very lethargic in that. They have to assume immediate control of town country planning. We did it. They have to assume immediate control of the EMA, to set up their own EMA here. The law says that it's under your purview. So do it. and we'll deal with the legal matters. But if you haven't done it as a third party or independent body, then the EMA in Trinidad is going to control you and stop your projects. It's an oxymoron. It was clear to see. What are they waiting on? They have to continue anti-worker acts, unnecessary layoffs, unnecessary contract termination, non-renewals, stop governing by recrimination, finding every way to pay salaries, wages, contractors, service suppliers on time, win back the public service, and so forth. Secretaries and assistant secretaries must be more accessible and reachable and begin to spend more time in their, and I emphasize more time, I would say they're not there, but more time in their constituencies. And very importantly, community development. No more big projects except the port development, and use whatever resources you have within the communities, build the community, look at the problems and issues within the communities, and that way, in the few remaining months, they should regain that political capital and perhaps surmount what they would have entered with. But I think that's key for their re-election and a productive Tobago. Excellent. But they have to begin to do the work.
Excellent indeed. But we've got to leave it there this morning. We want to say thank you very much, Max James, for joining us here on set at the Tobago Updates morning show. And to remind you folks that this is your opportunity to share the live, share the live, share the live.